Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Geekeasy Podcast. That is correct. This is episode 1 and I am Adam Stephen Kelly, otherwise known as Britgeek from Inaugural News. I am joined by none other than...
And I'm Dr. Karen Oughton, otherwise known as Dr. K or Doc Karen.
You've definitely got my voice there, which is quite scary. Yes, hello there everybody. We are the new Geekeasy Podcast and we will be with you every 2 weeks to bring you...
Chit-chat.
Some rather fantastic filmic time capsules talking about films from days gone by.
A lot of competitions for some pretty fantastic prizes, two of which we have 2 competitions in this very first edition podcast.
Do be warned, this is not going to be your normal competition, so get ready for it to be a little bit peculiar.
Yes, you're going to have to get a bit creative with these competitions.
Exactly.
Evil laugh.
What? I'm sweet and innocent, really, honestly. Sweet and innocent, that should probably be. We will also have music inspired by or from potential films from indie filmmakers.
And speaking of filmmakers, we also have some very special guests on the show. We are kicking things off with none other than Sean Hogan, who is the writer-director of the new film The Devil's Business and the upcoming West End play, The Halloween Session.
Is that a cat in the background?
Oh, it's a dog.
Oh, dog. Okay, sorry, dog. I've probably just insulted you. We will also be looking to reach out to you guys out there. So we're going to be doing things like film project notes, looking at crowdfunding, calls for talent, anything, whatever it takes to get your films off the ground. We want to make this a big community project. So if you like us, then for goodness sake, get your stuff into us. Tell us about your films, give us your trailers. Let us promote you. Let us help you and get your stuff out there and scare the living bloody crap out of everybody.
Absolutely.
Make them laugh, make them cry, whatever.
We'll be reaching out to the audience. This is going to be a show that is built around audience participation. We're going to be the most interactive podcast you can imagine, and all this interactivity is going to lead to cool things like promotion for your films and competitions. Like we said, this is interactivity and creativity combined to create this amazing podcast. We promise.
It will be rather funky, and one thing we will promise you is we will ask the things of the talent directors, the actors, whoever, and do the things that you want to do. Sod the rules. This is about the community and having a little bit of fun.
Yeah, a little bit of fun indeed. This is going to be a podcast like no other. It's going to be a bit of a strange podcast probably, but, you never know what quite to expect on this Geekeasy podcast.
All I will say, and you will eventually hear this probably on the blooper reel, hearing what me and Adam have gotten up to when we've been working through this in the first few weeks, 4 o'clock in the morning, oh dear.
I know, unbelievable, the amount of discussions that we've had that have verged onto the strangest tangents possible, and somehow we're going to incorporate that into this actual podcast, so be warned.
My computer gets Trojan horses. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that explains it all. Just for instance, in this episode, we're going to be looking at Japanese pink cinema and pinky violence.
With what is going to be an introduction to the competition that we're going to be running basically from a few weeks' time. We're going to give you a lead in because this is going to involve you guys doing something rather strange, but I think you'll quite like it. And, I get to be the first guinea pig. Oh boy. Thanks, Adam. Love you lots.
That's okay. Yes, we're going to be running our first creative competition in the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be called, it's going to be part of our time capsule where we look at films from the past and, just talk about movies really, shoot the breeze about the cinema that we like, and some obscure movies, I think. We're kicking things off, like I said, with Japanese pink cinema, and we're going for new Tokyo Decadence and Beautiful Girl Hunter, otherwise known as Star of David Beauty Hunting. And in fact, like Karen alluded to there as the guinea pig, with New Tokyo Decadence, her reactions to watching this film for the first time, and it's certainly a quite obscure movie. It's going to be all there for you to hear and actually see up on YouTube as well. So it's going to be a bit weird, but very funny, I think, as well.
It's going to be an interesting one. We'll come back to the actual what we need you to do for that particular competition like a bit nearer the time, so we'll give you time to suck it and see. Behave yourself and see, Adam. He's a nice boy, really, so I'm told. In the meantime, one thing we'd like you to do in terms of keeping up with us, keeping up with what's going on with the podcast, how you can contribute. Social networking. Yes, we're going to whore ourselves now.
Yeah, absolutely. Social media is the big thing, and it's going to be a big part of the Geekeasy podcast. Like we said, audience interaction, that obviously involves social media. We are on Twitter, we are on Tout. You can follow me personally on Twitter. It's at Britgeek, AICN, and on Tout, which is like Twitter with 15-second video clips. We're hopefully going to be doing loads of cool stuff on there. It's Britgeek, AICN on Tout as well. And Karen, you are on both as well.
I am, although he is very much a techie. Word of advice right now, he's a techie.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a very hard done by you. Yes, I'm on Twitter as Doctor, which is literally Dr. Karen Oughton, which is Oughton, odd spelling. I'm also on Facebook as Doc, D-O-C, Karen Oughton. Again, you can also find my webpage and so forth. And I'm also on Tout.
Yes, Doc Karen Oughton.
Yes, he knows more than I do about that. Obviously.
I know. I have to walk you through it, taking baby steps, all this technology stuff. I think, but your computer's just about running Windows 95.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an odd spelling, your name, for an odd person, I think. So that just kind of makes sense.
Fella, you're not that far away from me not to come and get you. Just remember that. You haven't
worked out how to reach out through the monitor yet. Although you're probably actually trying, as I'm saying this, you're actually trying to physically push your hand through the screen. Yeah, silence reveals everything.
The scary thing is you're actually right. It doesn't really, my brain doesn't work logically, which you will be able to see from things like my film criticism later. I don't have a logical mind at all.
It works illogically.
Yes, it's us about face and tit over top, but there you go. Obviously, one of the biggest events this week in terms of the film/geek world is obviously the opening of The Dark Knight Rises. So therefore, before we go any further, we're going to be talking about this on this podcast, partly as a celebration of the film, but also as a show that this is not reflective of our community, of the film community, of the geek community, or of whoever else. And we'd also really like to express our condolences to the people of Aurora who've had, obviously, this terrible, terrible tragedy. Please accept our good wishes and keep fighting, keep strong. Our thoughts are with you.
Yeah, absolutely. A real tragedy indeed. And it's such a shame that there's something which is meant for entertainment, and a film like The Dark Knight Rises is always going to have this kind of stigma about it, thanks to, one man's actions. I mean, whenever people are going to bring up The Dark Knight Rises now, I think everyone's going to think of Aurora, which is, it's a real shame for well, obviously the film, but I mean, that everyone involved. I mean, in the shootings, and how can people just go out and expecting to enjoy themselves for 2.5 hours, and it turns into such a tragedy. But we definitely send our condolences across the pond.
What would be kind of nice as an outcome of this in some ways would be for it to enable the people of Aurora to really step up and just show what amazing strong people they as American people can be, and show essentially the winning spirit of that film and everything that it says about the nation, and really come through and just show that it will take more than that incident to obviously they've been very hurt, but to just show what spirit they've got. So, passing out to you people. Of course, you've seen the film, haven't you, Adam?
I did. I saw it by the time you listen to this, it's about a week. But yeah, I have seen it, and I very much enjoyed it. It's the third and final part of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, and unlike the third Batman film of the last franchise, it's certainly a lot better than Batman and Robin from 95 or something, or no, that was Batman Forever, wasn't it? I'm talking nonsense. Batman Forever.
Which one was the one with nipples in it?
That was, I think, Batman and Robin.
I think you're right. I've got a vague recollection of something about nipples.
Yeah, that was on George Clooney's suit, wasn't it? So
Yay!
It was George Clooney, wasn't it?
I think so, yes.
And Val Kilmer was in Batman Forever with
yes.
Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face.
Ooh.
I know. I haven't seen those films in years, actually. Although I do love Tim Burton's first two. I think they're
Oh,
fantastic.
yes. Yeah, Danny DeVito was a penguin. Amazing. It's lovely.
I know. Amazing. But yeah, The Dark Knight Rises is a real... I know everyone uses the word epic now, but I mean, it's a trendy word. But it really is an epic movie. I mean, it's nearly 3 hours long, although you kind of expected that, but it really, brings the whole story to a close, ties up everything nicely, leaves you with a lot of food for thought, I think, by the time it's over. And I know a lot of people have been saying that there's like plot holes and everything, but I mean, come on, it's a movie about a crime-fighting bat, essentially. So you've got to suspend your disbelief a little bit. And no, I thought it was pretty fantastic, actually. And I enjoyed Bane. I didn't think he could compare to Heath Ledger's Joker, and I thought his voice was a bit ridiculous, to be honest. But I thought he was a pretty formidable-looking villain, and I think I might have preferred him to that pro wrestler's performance as Bane in the... again, I think it was Batman and Robin, or maybe Batman Forever. I cannot remember. Those films have kind of blurred into one for me. But yeah, it wasn't like a supernatural Bane like in that film. This was much more, real. And yeah, I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was an excellent way to cap off the trilogy.
I like the look of Bane because I like that there is, as you said, there's a kind of realism to how he actually looks, in the sense of he's very stocky, very, very big, very muscular, and yet the actual costuming is suggestive of almost like the Bob Mob community in some ways. So it's very much as though the costume becomes an extension of that individual person, and it kind of lends him like a machine-like presence, which at the same time makes it seem very, very supernatural, very unnatural, and in that way it's like a corruption of everything that a human should be. I kind of like the fact that it's not just some sick twist in some ways. It's meant to be almost like a Cyberman gone horribly wrong. At least that's what I seem to kind of get at, the whole mask and everything else. It's very much for anybody who's seen the Doctor Who, the Christopher Eccleston Doctor Who. One of the, I think, Christmas episodes had a kid in a mask, and the masks would then eat the face.
Lovely.
Yeah, have you seen that one?
No, I'm not a Doctor Who fan, I'm afraid. I know I'm going to get like hate mail for that, but whatever.
I must admit, I haven't seen any of the recent ones. I'd stopped watching when they got girlfriend Catherine Tate doing the companion, because I couldn't stick her. But I watched all the ones previous to that. But it's very much this kind of idea of machinery, and again the whole idea of machinery taking over and people kind of moving them into their bodies, and the moral kind of compass issues that can bring. I mean, that's just, as I say, I haven't seen the film yet, but that's kind of what I very much get from the Bane costume when you consider the whole emphasis in the Batman films that's put on the cape, put on the body armor, put on a guy making himself into a bat, for God's sake. This idea of moving from the human and the moral and the upright and everything that supposedly means, good, and, if you will, even like a Christian identity, you might argue, the American ideal, moving from that to something very much darker, something modified, something dangerous, something that doesn't have the same moral compass or indeed the same moral innards in that sense. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he uses the mask to breathe, so there's definitely that kind of, outright sort of mechanical aspect. And also, I mean, he's basically comes across as pure evil, and that's actually a quote in the film, and he's very, mechanical in that respect. Not just his appearance and his sort of, but I mean, his motivations, and he just wants destruction. Kind of like, the Joker in The Dark Knight Rises, just, wanting destruction. But, he may not be as mechanical as he may seem, as is revealed in the film, without giving too much away. But it's an interesting character by the time the credits roll.
That sounds fascinating, because that, I must admit, I find it fascinating, the ideas people have about what exactly is the essence of humanity. If you remember so many kids' cartoons, when you were a nipper, the baddies will always have something that marks them out as not being bad through and through. Take, for example, from my childhood, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder had a wicked sense of humour.
Yeah.
And you will often they will have something that, you know, it will be maybe something in the way their eyes are drawn, like in, say, Dungeons and Dragons. Something that says they're not completely bad, because to be somebody who, to use the Joker quote from Heath Ledger, just wants to see the world burn, is considered the absolute antithesis of humanity, in the sense that there's something, it goes completely against, in some ways, if you think about it, the Christian, I'm sure, other world religions' ideals as well, of that everybody can be saved. It goes so tantamount, so radically against everything we believe in, that all of a sudden you're left thinking, how can this person be human, when it's what we see, and we automatically relate to this person because they have some human qualities, and yet it's telling us, you know, everything about them is saying, actually, no, this is something completely different. How then do you react to that? If you see, it's the real syllogism. If you see something that looks exactly like you,
Yeah.
and it does something you're so absolutely against, whole Aurora thing again, I suppose, you're suddenly thinking, whoa, what makes you different from me?
Like with the Joker, I mean, the whole character's built on the whole, you know, combining sort of, you know, evil with, you know, humour.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, realistically, how many T-shirts was Keith Ledger's face on?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know, Heath Ledger was certainly the most kind of evil, I guess, incarnation of the Joker character. Yet he, you know, there were still some, you know, there were seeds in the Dark Knight which were just hilarious. I mean, the magic trick scene with the pencil. I mean, that was hilarious, but at the same time, it was disgusting, really. You know, thinking about it. I mean, you don't see too much, but I mean, that kind of juxtaposition, you know, says volumes about the character.
Yes, absolutely. Where you have this whole thing of somebody who, the whole idea of, you know, you will often get the childhood backstory or something like that, and it will often be something that is almost placed in there to kind of engender some sympathy, and yet that's counterpointed against this whole idea of evil and what is malevolent. How can you be bloody human? How can you have a beating heart within your chest if you can be that nasty? And yes, at the same time, counterpointed with so many different, you know, even just silly things occasionally. Yeah, I noticed you were talking earlier about Vane's voice. It does sound really oddly comic booky in a kind of old style, funny, silly, easy comics way.
Yeah.
And it wrong foots because it's not what you expect.
No, that's the thing. You don't expect it at all. I mean, you know, you see this character, and he's so physically imposing, and you know, with the mask, you know, he looks scary. And then you hear this voice, and it's kind of jarring in a way. You know, it's something you really do not expect, and I guess it's effective in that way. Although I still think it sounded a bit silly, but just from the point of view of it sounding so different to what you expect,
Yes.
definitely sets him apart. I mean, the voice alone, you know, he stands out from the crowd, definitely.
I'm going to have to go see this now. I really am going to have to go see this now. It does sound fascinating to me, this entire idea of a human as soldier, as mechanical being. And something, again, I mean, when we think about machinery, we think about construction, we think about things developing.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're going to think of, like, you know, other things that look similar, the, I can't think what they're called now, the monsters in Hellraiser, Begins of the Sea.
Cenobites.
Yeah. It's like, for example, if you think of the Cenobites in Hellraiser, again, you know, they actually had, in some ways, similar look. And even though the idea was obviously about torture, destruction through pain, it was also about achieving something through that pain. You know, we have such sights to show you. Something, again, coming out of that, as opposed to just absolute nil, that's it, we are going to smoulder. Nothing is going to be remaining, as opposed to the creation of something that comes out of the whole idea of sadomasochism, the creation of understanding of personal relationships that are developed through sadomasochism.
Yeah. All comes back to, you know, the actual, you know, the tragedy in Colorado. I mean, you know, what makes these people tick? And are they just these kind of killing machines, or what makes someone just snap or whatever? I mean, human beings. I mean, no one quite understands us.
No, and this is the thing. It's interesting because so much of horror now and even, you know, Superman flicks and all the rest of it, you know, all these superhero things, it's very much about kind of trying to understand this darker side, but at the same time, never really wanting it to be there. And we valorize, and we say, you know, these characters are our heroes. I mean, yes, of course, we have the whole Final Girl thing. We know about that. but looking at the way that people react to the Freddy Kruegers and all, the Hannibal Lecters, the idea of what we essentially take it to mean to be human, especially in a world where increasingly now, these days, we're getting used to seeing different conceptions of humanity. We're getting used to seeing, the entire idea of, 20, 30 years ago, for example, you would not see a disabled singer on television. You just wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
Robert Wyatt from Soft Machine being a case in point. They would put him on a chair to hide the fact that he was in a wheelchair. And yet our conception of what it means to be an active person in society is changing. All of a sudden we can have difference. And it's a case of how we then work out how we see this difference around the good old trusty of, good and bad and who's the winner, God and the devil, whatever you want to call it. When something isn't made within the image that we've been told since we were kids is right or is wrong, or not quite something right with it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a grey area. I mean, it's kind of like, there's different shades of what people consider, to be wrong. And I think, going back to like superheroes and stuff and these kind of, and almost angelic symbols in some cases.
Absolutely.
Obviously they're, it's not pertaining to reality, with their superpowers and whatnot. But I mean, the characters themselves just aren't realistic in that sense because, they're these all totally complete goodness. But I think everyone has something kind of dark about them, whether it's one thing or the other, obviously, from one extreme to the other. But no one's perfect, are they? And I think everyone has something in them that is a bit, I don't know.
You yourself.
Yeah, maybe I'm just strange. I'm not as strange as you, though, so there you go.
I get this a lot.
This is the thing. Listeners are going to be like, every week they're going to be writing up posters on their walls, which is like the Karen Strangeometer, and they're going to be marking different like stages on it every week.
Oh, that's worse. I have scared my students far too often. Well, getting a group of film students who think they're going to go and sit and watch films quietly, and they get me. Oh yeah,
yes.
It's very interesting actually saying about superhero films. I know that there are varieties of what is considered acceptable in the sense of, murder, yeah. We've had the Hulk going around smashing up people's little white picket fences for years. And yet, it's funny when we consider how moral/immoral or promotional of those two things superhero films in general are, in the sense of, you look at the promo stuff for Dark Knight Rises. I actually had a very well-known journalist who should remain nameless, bless his little heart, sending me a text the other day saying, would I like Anne Hathaway, Catwoman obviously, sitting on my face while in her sweaty catsuit? Yes, I have very salubrious friends, you know who you are out there. Yes.
Sorry.
But yes, we've got sirens. Yeah, we're used to having the idea of some, very carefully delineated, this is a moral thing, this is an immoral thing. To the extent that I was very, very interested in some ways to see that a number of the comics, I think, the comic people beginning with an M. Marvel, thank you.
How could you forget that?
I'm not good with comics. I don't like them personally. I'm pretty sure that I saw something in the paper recently that Marvel are having their first gay marriage within the comics. I can't remember who the hell the superheroes are, but there's been quite a few of these things now, and that seems really revolutionary.
Yeah.
Again, this idea of what it means in some ways, the eroticism of it, and what aspects, particularly religious countries, feel cannot be put over. It's okay to show murder, but hey, don't show gay. It becomes this huge full-on thing, whereas we see Anne Hathaway, it's like, whoa, hubba. Which is... So yeah, it's in some ways it's really a case of what we actually perceive as human, what we want out of it, because at the end of the day, from what I've heard of the review that I read of it that said it wasn't spoilery, but it's bloody well spoilery. I can't remember whose review it was. It was one of the big newspapers in England. But they were basically saying how it's going to plan out. reasonably from the word go, because you find out one of the characters' names and stuff like that. And I was thinking, okay, so you just played the entire film for me, thank you.
Yeah.
They did a lot more than I did. There is still this thing that we can't have resolution yet. I mean, Stephen King in his book Dance Macabre talks an awful lot about the need for people to have crisis and have a space, a thoughtful space, in this case, cinema or graphic novels, or wherever the hell it may be, where they can go and, just try and get through things in their head a little bit, have permission to sit and think about this stuff, albeit in a fantasy context. And quite frankly, the world is in a tricky situation at the moment, so we can't have resolution. So from what I can gather, potentially, it sounds like an absolutely cracking film.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think, with the actual character of Batman, at least in Christopher Nolan's films, is that one of the things that makes the character so interesting, Christian Bale's character, is that he isn't this, take Superman, for example. I mean, he's basically this kind of angelic figure, and he can do no wrong, at least in the way he's been, the incarnations of Superman we've seen over the years. But as far as Batman goes, he isn't just dark in this, in his suit. Goodness will always be his objective. But especially in The Dark Knight Rises, there's various crises he's having with his, personality and ideals, and he isn't this perfect kind of human being in the film, and I think that's what makes Batman specifically more interesting than other superhero characters. He's kind of the anti-superhero in a way, or the norm. He's not the norm, let's say.
No, I think that's actually. I think it's fascinating. So, I mean, I also know that in a lot of the things I've seen, that he's apparently got a gammy leg now or something in the new film. Also, particularly, I must admit that the one thing I've always loved about Christian Bale's Batman is because he was American Psycho. I cannot help but read that into it. Which I think was amazing. I mean, there's two scenes in that film, rather, that I will always think of. One is the one where he's dancing before he gets blood over a certain portion of his body, and another one where he's doing the business with a lady and watching himself in the mirror, both of which I think are absolutely brilliant scenes, because it does just show this twisted version in some ways of the American dream. And in that sense, just the idea of, the American dream, people, particularly within England, who may not necessarily get this. I teach a lot of Americans when I'm doing my university courses. It's good, honest, hard labour to get to where you want. It's the idea of that the individual person can try and can succeed with enough sheer bloody grit to do it.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of, some English people have this idea it's kind of extremely cheesy and stuff like that. It's not really what it's about. It's a far more honest thing about that. So hence it does go through this kind of really skewed mirror. And, hence you come out with this guy who, you say, is kind of like angelic, especially with the cloak. I mean, hey, you've got angel wings right there.
Exactly.
And yet he's in it. Yeah, exactly. And yet he's in a rubber fetish suit. Come on. Seriously.
It's one of the tangents I warned you about.
Sorry. With that, I shall be good.
Well, that's a bit of a little white lie there, talking about tangents and weirdness and going off them a bit. Actually, it's time for our time capsule. And our first film that we're going to look at is New Tokyo Decadence, The Slave from 2007, which is a spin-off from Tokyo Decadence, which was in the early 90s, which I've seen, but I haven't seen New Tokyo Decadence, The Slave. But Karen now has, and you're going to be listening to her reaction, which was her live reaction, by the way, of seeing the film for the very first time. And we're going to be talking about that film, and also Japanese pink cinema, or pinky violence, as it's also known. We're going to be taking a look at that today on this debut edition of the Time Capsule. So, yeah, this is going to get a little weirder, actually, and, I guess you'll just see.
Listener discretion is advised. Again.
Okay, we have a young girl, completely naked, hanging from a tree in the middle of what looks like maybe a maize field. Oh, and she's got shaved pubes. And her boobs are all bondaged. I wish my heart would stop, she says. That's actually a really beautiful shot. That's an extreme long shot of... Okay, bye-bye. Rinko Shari? New Tokyo Declan's slave, apparently. Tokyo Declan's 2. Okay, a bloke in a business suit tying up a girl in a schoolgirl, a girl in like a schoolgirl outfit. My math teacher in high school made me aware of my inner self. I'm a masochist. Sorry. Oh, and they've done the rope binding thing. The Japanese rope binding thing. That's really cool, actually. He looks like he's about 14. Oh dear God. This bloke who looks like a 14-year-old boy has got her on the bed, kind of all trust... What the fuck? Oh, Adam, this is poor. And he's stimulating her with a... yeah, use your imaginations. Wow, amazing. I can't believe he actually said, wow, amazing. He's saying sine, cosine, tangent. Oh my god, algebra in bed, that's... Seriously, he's quizzing her on algebra, I think. Or Pythagoras or something, I don't know. Maths is not my thing. Please give me your huge dick, I'm sorry. Oh, come on, that's got to be fake. It's hardly past puberty, surely. Oh god, Adam. The pink candle thing, oh god. It's like he's giving you a lot more than pleasure, love. I'd already decided to live as a masochist. This is what I get up to on a Sunday afternoon. Oh no, don't, please. Okay, she's now sitting on the bog with a riding crop. Oh, that's a nice outfit actually, red kind of little thing. The funny thing that's happening here is we've gone from that really beautiful opening shot, which really was genuinely very pretty, to some very odd camera movements that do just like, they just look like very low-grade porn. Oh god, please don't do an up the arse shot, please. I'll give her so much she can rock these stockings.
Wow. That was interesting.
Very, very, very odd. I mean, how the hell do you say, realistically, I'm watching somebody having a clit you can't properly see be stimulated by a pink fluffy dildo?
That's Japanese pink cinema for you then.
Oh, yeah. It's just so weird because, I mean, the guy in particular looked like he's about 14. It's just like, this isn't even kind of the kind of big old man kind of does the servant girl thing. It's like, he looks like a weenie. He looks like something out of Harry Potter. It's just, oh god.
Isn't Harry Potter, was it?
Yeah.
Hogwarts decadence.
that is in fact entirely more possible.
It's a fanfic.
I can say, okay, I challenge somebody out there to do this. It really is mental, though, 'cause it's just, some of it is just really, really strange, but some of it's actually quite sexy. But, I mean, seriously, I mean, there's bits in it, like, for anybody who knows Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, where all of a sudden, you know, you've got the kind of snapshots of all the gangsters when they first introduce them, it suddenly goes like that, it's like, okay, Mr. Ritchie, have you watched something you haven't been telling us about? I'll tell you one thing. When I next do my British cinema course, I will have to say, okay, people, this is your list of source material. See, I didn't warn you.
Corrupting your students.
That's the best fun about being a lecturer. Because realistically, it's only like corruption to lecturer. It works, trust me. They get some of shit with me anyway, it's unbelievable.
Listeners, just students, none are safe.
Exactly. It's funny because it seems to be the actual film. It's funny because Pinky stuff seems to be, you know, the stuff I've seen of it tends to have far more of a comic element in it as well. It'll go from really hardcore, nasty shit. I mean, there was a bit later on in this that I actually felt quite uncomfortable in, and that's unusual for me.
Yeah.
I have a very high tolerance threshold, but I just sort of, whoa, I know obviously she's acting, and I know that yada, but oh, yuck. And to me, that's actually a good thing, because I began to think all this and thought, well, fuck yeah, I'm not being funny, but it suggests it's being done well. Because otherwise it just looked like two people play wrestling. Seriously, I mean, I'm not being funny, but to make... Do you know what doing the wheelbarrow is? Literally the wheelbarrow race. It's like the wheelbarrow race. It's like, seriously, it actually made me feel, oh, you know, this is a bit icky-fied.
Is there any comedy in that? Not that scene, but in the film that you at all? Because I remember in the because I haven't seen that one. That's New Tokyo Decadence: The Slave from I think 2007.
Yes.
But I've only seen I've seen the first one, just Tokyo Decadence, which is I think 92 or 93, and as far as I can remember, that doesn't have any comedy at all. It's quite a unsettling and everything sort of dark, and there's no
Sick pervy piece of shit is the word you're looking for.
yeah, but it as well as being that, it's very grim and there's no sort of light in it.
Yeah, I mean, this one far less so, but it's kind of... I mean, I found Beautiful Girl Hunt to be quite funny in places, hideously funny in places. Whereas with this one, there are some funny bits in it, because it's just... I mean, seeing that guy, honest to God, he looks like he's about 40. He looks like Harry Potter in the second one, Chamber of Secrets. He actually has the same, like, hairdo and stuff.
Yeah, those circular... Yeah, those little round glasses.
Yes, exactly. It's that kind of game.
But not a wand.
He's got a wand, mate.
Oh, a pink wand.
Yeah, after a while the little pink thing gets dispensed with, out comes the wand, because he is doing still teaching, and the pointy thing gets used. I shall be good, I promise.
Really am starting to think this actually is some kind of Harry Potter X-rated version. It definitely sounds like it could be, but yeah. made in Japan.
It's Harry Potter's wet dream, which is even it's funny because it has got that kind of kick to it, in the sense that later on it kind of plays out. So the comedy parts, after a while, they stop. I'd love to know. I'd love to know if it's meant to be like that, because later on the funny bits don't occur anywhere near as much. And you're laughing out of shock as opposed to out of the fact that, well, not even really shocked, but you're kind of laughing just because your body needs to react. As opposed to the fact it is genuinely funny. I mean, that first bit is genuinely funny because it just looks so peculiar. It's absolutely beautiful kind of Japanese rope bondage, which is very, very pretty, seriously. You know, it's worth a Google if you're not in work. Please, work. Pretty please.
NSFW.
Yes, very big NSFW.
I think that's probably the case for this entire podcast.
But it's got this contrast to this Japanese white bondage with this woman. I'm actually not going to show you before I just no, don't do that. You know, if you know what direct bondage looks like, it's kind of done properly and done well. And yes, as it goes on, it becomes a far more serious investigation of masochistic relationships, where obviously you have the sadist and masochist. It's based on an idea of trust, and it becomes a far more serious in some ways about how they work out the limits of what it will take to make her happy, what it will take to make him happy, and what happens when other people come out of the equation. And it ends up becoming a lot more thoughtful, as I say, and that's when it starts to stop. I actually had a kind of slight squeamy moment. But yeah, the first thing you see is this girl hanging from a tree. But she's got her legs slightly kinked, so she's got one leg like that and one leg kind of slightly akimbo. So even though it's this chick hanging from a fucking great tree in the middle of a barley field or something, completely starkers, it also looks quite demure, which is really, really bizarre because you're not sure how to react. It looks very classical.
So it starts off very grim then.
I actually thought it was quite beautiful. I mean, she's quite happy. She's sitting there with her eyes open, going, "Oh, look at the birds," or whatever.
But she was dead.
No. She's not dead. You eventually find out how she got there. But she's perfectly happy just hanging around, knuckles to the world, really. But it's just funny because when you first see it, you're just not sure how to react to it. It does look like it reminded me of the cinematography of, and again, I hate me saying it, stuff like Drafting Tiger. It has that kind of classical. The one thing they tend to be very, very good in that part of the world is cinematography. It's beautiful, it's edible, and that's part of the thing that's lovely about this film, because even if you are, whether or not you are into this kind of shebang, into the whole kind of masochism stuff, masochism even, stuff, by God, it makes it good.
So she's hanging from a tree by a noose.
Yeah, she's got this thing around just around her boobs, and she's just hanging there, just
That's
watching
the
her
hook.
go by.
The hook like no other. It's a page. That's a page one hook. When they're reading the script, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is a woman hanging off a tree. I have to read more." I think Amazon orders for New Tokyo Decadence the Slave have just skyrocketed. And actually, I'd love to read the script for something like that, because I just love to see how stuff like that was written. Like, it would be hilarious just to read if it was like translated. But I mean, have you ever seen like segments of the script for Last House on the Left before it became what it was?
No.
Well, it was basically this. Wes Craven was basically making this semi-porn film almost, and there's some very, very strange action lines in the original Last House on the Left screenplay. Yeah, so it's just funny seeing how this kind of stuff is worded. Wow, so that was New Tokyo Decadence, The Slave from 2007, and yeah, very interesting to say the least. And the next one will be Star of David, Girl Hunting, also known as Beautiful Girl Hunter, which, again, I've never seen, but Karen has, unlike me with New Tokyo Decadence. So, what can I expect?
Oh dear. There is a beautiful scene with public speaking. Absolutely, I genuinely love that scene. There's a thing for animal lovers. A good bit of cross.
Yes, that's the Church of Japanese Pink Cinema then, and New Tokyo Decadence the Slave this week, and in 2 weeks on August 15th, Star of David, Girl Hunting, also known as Beautiful Girl Hunting, by yours truly. So I hope you've got that to look forward to, or be totally scared of. I'm not quite sure what to think, but I look forward to the experience nonetheless. And yes, that ties directly into the competition that we will be announcing in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's a very creative competition, as you can probably guess by now. But we thought, Karen and I, that we'd be the guinea pigs for the first 2 episodes and to lead you in and possibly scare you off. But it's a bit of fun, and will open your eyes to some strange films. our very first competition on this show, 2 competitions I might add, I'm going to be giving away a complete 8-season box set of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is every episode, every season, the whole shebang of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And normally we don't do competitions which are just going to be boring old questions, but for this first episode we thought, we'd hook you with this question. But as we said, in the future we're going to be, we're going to be coming out of your ears and dragging you into the podcast with some very interactive competitions. But for today, to win a complete Curb Your Enthusiasm box set, we're just going to ask you a question, and it's so easy, but there you go. It's not going to be that easy from here on out, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, if you would like to win this box set, just email thegeekeasy@yahoo.com and tell us who created Curb Your Enthusiasm. If you're a fan of the show, it's a very easy question. Easy is good. So just send your answer to thegeekeasy@yahoo.com and we will pick a winner at random and announce it on the next show on August 15th. Well, we did say we were going to feature independent artists prominently on the Geekeasy podcast, whether that's filmmakers or indeed independent bands, musicians, composers, whatever. If you're either of those things, send us your tracks. Email us, thegeekeasy@yahoo.com, and we'll do our very best to feature your work on an episode. That was our very first song, Nicholas Ray by the band Bugprentice. You can go to bugprentice.com, bugprentice.com, Prentice. And also you can follow Ali from the band on Twitter at Mr_Craig. Bog Prentice, that song was actually inspired by Bigger Than Life and Rebel Without a Cause. So it was a song that was directly inspired by music. And hey, that doesn't always have to be the case with any tracks you want to send in. You may think that one of your songs may fit in with a horror movie. Tell us what kind of movie you think it would fit in, and maybe there's some people listening who would want to feature that in their film. It's all about supporting independent artists and, I guess, in a way, kind of networking to some extent. And hey, it doesn't matter what kind of band you're in, or whether you're a classical pianist or a death metal band or some kind of composer. Hey, that may mean that thematically this show doesn't make a lick of sense, but that's how we like it. And as for Bog Prentice, they're actually working on an album at the moment, which is featuring songs inspired by the likes of The Purple Rose of Cairo and, bizarrely enough, the wine commercials that Orson Welles did back in the day. And I believe those are the commercials that he perhaps was a little bit too familiar with the product on, if I remember correctly. Probably worth a look on YouTube if you're not quite familiar with that, but that's some pretty interesting and unique inspiration for Bug Prentice's upcoming album, and hopefully look forward to hearing a little bit more. And that leads us into our very first interview here on the Geekeasy. As we said, we'll be having a number of special guests on the show, one every episode. So you can expect some pretty fantastic interviews, including our very first one, which is an excellent interview with Sean Hogan, who is the writer-director of The Devil's Business. He also wrote and directed a segment of the horror anthology Little Deaths, and is actually going to be working on a West End play with the likes of Kim Newman this autumn. That is called The Halloween Sessions. But on August 17th, The Devil's Business is released in select UK cinemas from Metrodome Entertainment. And, here's Sean to tell us much more about it.
Okay, our first interview is with the rather wonderful Sean Hogan, writer and director of The Devil's Business. Firstly, hi Sean, how the damn hell are you?
I'm pretty good. The devil's keeping me well at the moment.
Marvellous. Okay, so we spoke to you very briefly last year at Fright Fest. Firstly, can you tell us a bit about what your film's about and where you are that's different to last year? Because obviously last year, we saw it for the first time, and I gather quite a lot's happened for you since then.
Okay, well, the film is kind of sort of a hybrid film noir horror movie. It starts out more like a crime movie with two hitmen turning up at an isolated country house in the middle of the night, and they break in and they settle down to wait for their victim, their contract. And while they're waiting, one of the older men of the two begins to tell his partner a weird story about something that happened to him once. And they get interrupted, and they make some strange discoveries in the house. And then the intended victim turns up, and they attempt to go through with the hit, but it doesn't all quite go according to plan, at which point it starts to morph into more of a horror movie. Basically we finished it a year ago. It took a while to finish because I was juggling post-production on another film, previous film I did. So we shot it in July 2010, finished it in sort of July, August 2011. And now in July 2012, it's just about to come out. We have UK distribution with Metrodome, and they are releasing it. It's getting a small theatrical release on August 17th, and then should be out on sort of DVD and VOD and everything soon after that.
So
that's where we are, basically.
Almost a year then after the Fright Fest screening.
Almost a year after the Fright Fest screening, and 2 years after we shot the bloody thing. But that's the nature of indie films. They're sort of new and wonderful to everyone when they come out, but you've been living with them for like 2 years, and you're completely bored of them.
Oh, bless you. So what you're saying is your hand's about to fall off from shaking people's hands, and the drink offers, and all the wonderfulness that comes with being a director and so forth.
Yeah, allegedly. No, it's been great. We played quite a few festivals with it, and we had a great UK premiere, and then also in the US at Fantastic Fest. And it's just been really nice because there are very specific reasons as to why we made this film, and it's actually the smallest film I've ever made. And it's been really heartening that people have responded well to it, because I didn't really have any expectations. I did it as a palate cleanser after some bad experiences I'd had. So it's been really nice that people have actually liked it.
Oh, bless your heart. I know you also did a preview recently at, is it the Rio Cinema in London?
Yeah, that was last week. We did a sort of midnight screening in advance of the theatrical release, which was fun. That's with Cigarette Burns. Josh Sacker, who runs Cigarette Burns, was keen to give it a little preview, and so we went down there and showed it to the Dalstonites at midnight, which was fun. It seemed to go down well.
Yep, it's good, and they're a discerning crowd as far as I can gather. So this is a marker of quality.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
So what kind of films inspired that? Because obviously you said that just now that it's a film noir meets a horror movie. So what? Obviously it's quite a unique combination. So what films, film noirs and horror movies, kind of inspired you to blend the two?
I think on the sort of crime noir front, there's definitely elements of stuff like The Hit by Stephen Frears. The sort of relationship between the two hitmen was kind of comes out of that. And going back to stuff like The Killers and things like that, it's just you have these sort of relationship between two hitmen, and there's always like an older, more experienced one and a younger, hot-headed one. So I think there's a real sort of noir tradition of those two characters. On the horror front, there's a lot. I mean, one of the interesting things about talking about the movie recently has been people keep coming up with, oh, was this an influence or was that an influence? And in some cases, it's not even anything I've thought about, but when I look back at it, I kind of have to go, yeah, you know what? I love that movie, and it's been in my head for years, so it probably did creep in there. The conscious ones, I mean, definitely a lot of Polanski's early films influenced me quite a lot, just the sort of claustrophobia of them and the idea that you can make an effective horror movie with just one location and a few characters. That kind of, that claustrophobia and the tension building. Yeah. Also, Val Lewton stuff for this, definitely. I always said that Devil's Business was a B movie in the best sense of the word, because when I look back at the Val Lewton movies, they're all like only 60, 70 minutes long, and they're obviously done on low budgets, but yet they turn that into an advantage, and just the way that he uses suggestion and mood to compensate for the fact that they didn't have a vast effects budget or whatever else. And I think those are lessons you can apply equally today, and that's certainly what we try to do with this.
Yeah, it's the thing I think with independent filmmaking is, of course, you've got Hollywood blowing, millions of dollars on special effects, but at the end of the day, the bare bones of filmmaking comes to script and direction and characters. I think, if you excel at those, then, you're onto a winner. And you don't need all this money.
That's what I'd hope. Traditionally the idea is that you don't necessarily need a lot of money to make horror movies anyway, because they're not star-driven or anything like that. But still, so a lot of the bigger budget ones, as you say, are driven by special effects, and even a lot of the independent stuff, they don't always seem to pay due attention to script or dialogue or anything like that, or acting, and it's just a shame because the horror movies I grew up on, certainly the 70s stuff, they were just so much smarter and paid attention to things like that, and it's that's something I'd like to see more of. And you do have people doing that, but they, sometimes they seem a bit few and far between.
Out of interest, do you, when you're writing and kind of devising stuff, do you do it for yourself or for the audience in terms of how do you work out how to up the ante the whole time?
I think when you sit down to write, you're initially telling yourself the story, and whilst you do have to bear the audience in mind to a certain extent. Obviously, I don't write for an audience. I mean, I think it's dangerous if you try and do that, because no one really knows anything. Audiences, if you speak to sort of distributors or producers or whatever, then they'll always tell you what the audience want to see. The audience won't like this, the audience won't like that. But, I think when it comes down to it, the audience want to see something they haven't seen before, not necessarily a rehash of what they have seen before, which is not necessarily the industry way of looking at it. When I sat down to write this, you know, the one scene in the movie that everyone talks about a lot is the monologues when the Pinner character tells this story. And when I sit down, I knew I was going to do that. I knew I wanted to have one character tell a story, and that story to sort of come into play throughout the film. But I didn't really know what it was going to be, and I just sort of sat down to write it and see what would come out. And I ended up with this 5-page monologue, and, you know, I looked at it, I was like, well, I'm taking a chance here, but I like it, and if we get the right actor in, and, you know, hopefully it will play, and if it doesn't, we'll worry about that when it comes to it. But essentially, you know, there was no way, if I'd have made this film through official channels for a bigger budget, I guarantee you the first note I would have got back would have been, take this out, it's just a guy talking for 5 pages. And that's what happens when you try and second-guess the audience, because, you know, everyone in their infinite wisdom would have said, the audience won't sit still for that, it's boring, blah, 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 and yet that's the scene in the movie that most people comment on, and that's got some of the best reactions. So, you know, I think you're on dodgy ground if you try and keep the audience in mind too much.
I wonder, you have some enormous tonal changes in some of your films. We've, obviously, in the past, we've had things like we've had vulnerable, sexy, homeless people who turn out to be quite monstrous. We've had gangsters who refuse to die. What do you aim to achieve by these rather huge, often tonal changes?
I don't know. You know, you can never really tell how people are going to perceive your stuff from the outside. So, you know, you may say massive tonal changes. To me, they seem perfectly organic. I mean, I suppose you're always trying to put a little twist on things, and not necessarily in the sense of plot twists, but a lot of these sort of, you know, horror tropes or whatever are very familiar, and you're always sort of trying to freshen them up a bit and just look at things in slightly new ways and keep it interesting for yourself. It's like, you know, there's nothing worse than writing a script if you just feel like you're going over old ground and you're not bringing anything to the table. So I guess that's it. It's just the first person you don't want to bore is yourself. And so I'm always trying to keep things alive personally when I'm writing them. And, you know, I like I mean, sometimes people talk about the humour in this film, and, you know, I certainly never saw myself as a comedy writer or whatever else, but, you know, sometimes bringing in elements of black humour and whatever else can be kind of interesting and spice things up a bit. So I guess there's a certain element of that. But it's very difficult for me to look at it and say, essentially, what I'm writing is kind of the way I see things and the way I see the world, and maybe that is a bit idiosyncratic, I don't know.
It certainly works on the comedy front. The nice thing is it gives it very much a kind of level of realism that is very much the old East End.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, that was something that kind of happened very organically when I was writing the script. I didn't sit down with the intention of it being this kind of like bantering comedy relationship between them, but they just sort of took over. That's the way the characters developed, and I just went with it, and it was actually gratifying watching it with an audience and seeing that the laughs were actually there. You know, you kind of think, as a horror director, you sort of like, all right, well, you know, I have a reasonably good feeling about the fact that I can do the horror thing, but comedy is a bit of an unknown thing for me. So you know, when you're actually getting the laughs, it's quite nice.
It's nice to see that, you know, in so many horror movies these days you have these cookie-cutter characters, unfortunately. It's nice to hear of, you know, characters, at least in the writing process, that kind of evolve naturally, and you know, they go ways in which you kind of didn't expect when you sat down to, you know, to create them. Yeah,
I mean, again, it just comes back to the fact that I grew up on movies that were very character-based, not just horror movies, but, you know, 70s movies in general. It was just a different time, and there were a different kind of films being made, and so for better or for worse, that's kind of in my blood. That's what formed me, and so those are the kind of movies I like to try and make. And the fact that I'm working within genre, to me, doesn't mean that I can't do that. I know that, as you say, a lot of horror movies don't really worry about that kind of thing. But to me, it's like, well, why can't you? A lot of my favourite horror movies are ones that, you know, have are stronger in terms of character and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of what I'm looking to try and do.
Yeah, again, it's going back to, I mean, as you said, the horror movies of the 70s and character, and again, back to the whole, you know, independent filmmaking. I mean, so many of the most iconic horror films, you know, of the 70s and 80s, they were independently made. They didn't have all that money. So it just goes to show, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of had a sneaking suspicion that that independence is really the way to go for horror movies. I mean, there have been great studio horror movies, but equally, a lot of the really groundbreaking, risk-taking ones were made by people who just, scraped together a few bucks and went and did it because they didn't have people looking over their shoulder saying, you can't do that, that's too weird, or that's too unpleasant, or that's too shocking, And I think, horror is a genre that thrives on breaking taboos, and it's difficult to do that in an industry where, and understandably to a certain extent, where you're spending a lot of money, even on independent films. You're still spending thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and people do understandably get a bit worried about that. But equally, horror's not a genre that works when you play safe.
Yeah.
What kind of characters do you feel you're particularly drawn to?
I don't know. I guess kind of outsiders, morally conflicted characters. I don't write heroes and villains per se. I don't think I've ever written a horror script that had a sort of clear-cut hero in it. I tend to write shades of grey. Some people are worse than others, but certainly in the Devil's Business, they're all pretty bad. Equally, I do like writing the sort of the worst characters, the more evil characters. That they can be sort of quite delicious to write. But yeah, it just comes down to I don't want to write characters that make it easy. This is the guy in the white hat. This is the guy in the black hat. It's just interesting to me when you try and mix it up a bit. If you look at certainly what I tried to do in Little Deaths with my episode in that was, the monsters were the heroes in that, essentially. The bad guys were the nice middle-class couple. So it's just, again, you're just sort of trying to sort of find interesting people to write about, and to me, interesting people are not the ones that you can reduce to sort of one level.
And what is your writing process like? I mean, as a writer myself, I always find it interesting, whether other writers, work from treatments, or if they set aside a certain time of the day to sit down and write, or.
Well, for starters, I loathe writing treatments. It's my real pet hate, and I'll always try and avoid it if at all possible. But it's difficult when someone's paying you because they kind of want to see what they're getting. So no, but I do generally tend to prepare quite a lot in terms of just making a lot of notes and thinking about things, and I'll do a sort of step outline, but that's as far as I go. I tend to know what the structure's going to be, but I just hate writing treatments. Devil's Business actually wasn't like that so much, though. For once, I did wing it a bit. I knew what the basis was, and I knew who the characters were, but I didn't necessarily know precisely what was going to happen, and it was the one time where I've sat down and written a script and kind of let the characters take me where they will, and, in this case, I think it really worked for me. But normally I'm a bit more prepared than that. And basically, yeah, I tend to be sort of quite disciplined about it. I'm not one of these people who sits around waiting for inspiration to strike. It's like if I'm going to start writing a script, there will always be the sort of certain amount of prevarication because there's nothing more frightening than an empty page. But once I start, I'll generally sort of tend to try and write between 5 and 10 pages a day, and I'll just try and power straight through it. And basically, yeah, I always make a playlist. I always listen to a lot of music while I'm writing. Again, some people need silence. I need music going while I write. And sometimes it'll come down to like playing the same damn song over and over again while I write, which drives the neighbours absolutely mental. But I get into sort of quite an obsessive mindset when I'm sort of going full steam ahead.
Okay, well, we need a playlist. What is the Sean Hogan directorial playlist?
It varies from film to film. Each film has its own playlist. So, with Devil's Business, and this kind of really comes back to what happened with the music in the film, is that I'd recently been introduced to a UK band called Crippled Black Phoenix, and I was listening to a lot of their stuff, and it's very cinematic music, a lot of it, and it's clearly someone who'd been influenced by sort of film scores and all this sort of thing. So I really got into listening to them, and while I was writing, and there was one track that I kept listening to incessantly, and it finally got into my head to such an extent that I was like, we should really see if we can license this track for the movie, because otherwise this is just going to haunt me forever. And so we approached the band and sort of said, look, we haven't really got any money, but we're doing this film, and would you be willing to talk to us about using this track in the film? And essentially had a conversation with Justin Greaves, who's the band leader. And he turned around and he's like, yeah, you can use the track, but wouldn't you rather I wrote an original score for you? I was like, yeah, let me think about that for just 1 minute. And so, lo and behold, Justin came on board and actually ended up writing the music, which was kind of a very, very happy accident. But that's sort of blossomed into a really nice working relationship. So that all worked out really well. So yeah, that's the process.
In terms of yourself as a writer and director, are there any habits or anything you wish you could change that you're working on in terms of your own kind of personal development?
I mean, you're always trying to get better. I mean, for me, I look forward to the day when I actually have something resembling a proper shooting schedule, because then I'll get a better idea of, what it's like to sort of sit around and have time to think about the shots properly and discuss things with the actors properly. I always feel like it's always been a mad rush up till now when I'm working. So, yeah, I mean, I want to keep pushing in terms of both the visuals and the performances and just have time to really pay attention to these things, which I don't feel like I've ever quite had. I mean, I always, I will always get the best I can get in the time, and I do a lot of prep on the look of the film, and I try and write with bearing actors in mind and write stuff they can play, but very often I don't have much time with them. We had no rehearsal time on The Devil's Business whatsoever. Jack and Billy, who played the two leads, never even met each other until we were on set. So for me, it's really just kind of about getting the budgets to an extent where I feel like I can give the best of myself.
And how long did it take you to shoot The Devil's Business?
We shot it in 9 days, which was a mad scramble. We were shooting from like 4 p.m. till 4 a.m. every day for 9 days straight. So you do kind of become slightly delirious after a while. But essentially what worked about it is that we were basically, in our own little bubble, our own little world. So everyone there was just focused on one thing, which was making the film. So I mean, I was pulling my hair out at times, again, sort of saying, I haven't got enough time to get everything I want. I've just, sometimes you can only get the bare minimum. But it was a lot of fun to do, I have to say. And after sort of some of the recent experiences I'd had, it was really nice just to go onto a location with a group of like-minded people and just bash out a movie and for it to be fun.
That sounds uber. In terms of getting stuff like yours out there, which I'm sorry, people, this needs to be seen, seriously. What do you think that the film industry can do to help guys like you?
For starters, they can stop just trying to make what was successful last year. I am heartily sick of being asked for zombie movies or found footage movies. It's like we've had enough of both of them for the time being. There have been some great ones, but equally, it's like horror's capable of doing other stuff. And just because they were successful last year doesn't mean that's all you should be making. My stuff tends to be a little bit more idiosyncratic. So, I've got one script I really want to do that we're not even looking for a lot of money to do it, but it just keeps being turned down time and time again. And yet all I see is more of the same being made. I know of one quite notable director who went for a meeting about with a production company who were looking to do genre stuff, and they basically sort of said, well, we want something that's like either Buried or Paranormal Activity, because they did really well last year. And he was like, well, what, shall I make you about a movie about a guy trapped in a haunted box then? That's just that kind of mentality drives me absolutely mental. But that's unfortunately where the industry is at the moment.
Facepalm head desk, basically.
Yes.
And what are your thoughts on the current state of the British film industry?
Well, I remember when I first started thinking about making films, and there wasn't an industry. I mean, it was not something that anyone did at that point. So I'm kind of heartened by the fact that that's changed, at least. I don't know. I mean, there's one of the interesting things about going back to when I made my first movie, was when I made that, I was kind of in a bubble. I didn't really know any other filmmakers or anything like that, and doing the festival circuit with that introduced me to a lot of people, both here and abroad. But it was nice discovering that there was a UK indie scene and that people were trying to make these movies, any way they could. And there are some really interesting people out there. But equally, I think it's a tough time as well. What I keep hearing from distributors is that there is no market for UK indie films at the moment. People just aren't going to see them. And every now and then you'll have something that busts out. But a lot of the time it's tough, and that obviously makes it tough to get stuff made. So it's a shame. I don't really know what the answer is, but it would be nice if people would start kind of looking a bit further beyond their local multiplex and sort of checking out what's going on in their own country, really.
Yeah. One thing that interests me is a few weeks ago I spoke to a young filmmaker from the States who had just had her film distributed in the UK, and it was financed by, I believe it was Kickstarter. So what are your thoughts towards crowdfunding or crowdsourcing?
I mean, it obviously works for a lot of people. I'm probably in danger of sounding like the sort of, grumpy old man here. It's like, you damn kids, get off my lawn. For me, I feel a bit uncomfortable about it personally, but I came up basically scraping together whatever money we could do to do stuff ourselves, just by finding private money and making deals with people and all that kind of thing. And it feels a bit odd to me to actually sort of go out there cap in hand to everyone and say, give me money to make a film, guys. I'm like, I always, when I was making shorts, I basically paid for them myself. So, I mean, I'm not anti it, and I know there are people out there who have done good work and deserve a bit of help. It's just every time I look at Facebook now, there's someone else sort of asking for money to do something, and I'm like, if you want to do something, just go and do it.
Yeah.
But that's, times change, things are different, and it obviously has helped some good, talented people. It's just not a way I choose to work, but that's because I'm getting old and stubborn, I suppose. But I don't know, maybe I'll eat my words and I'll try and do it at some point. I'm not sure.
I must admit, I think that's a very, very interesting thing to say, from the sheer basis of the fact that so much, as you say, I mean, you go into Facebook and you get absolutely deluged by bucket loads of sodding things. Give me money for this, give me money for that. In terms of how the horror industry in particular is progressing, that adds one hell of a lot of peer pressure, because all of a sudden you've got about 10 different mates saying, give me money for this. Do you think it's a good thing to just get the interest in horror kind of increasing by, getting it to be this big community where it's like some of the film festivals, that is people's holiday. They will.
Yeah, I mean,
say, hold it.
It will. I mean, it will only draw attention to the horror genre in a good way if people are making good stuff. If a bunch of bad projects get funded by Kickstarter, that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the people who put money into it. It doesn't help the genre. Now, I'm not saying either way that they will be bad. But it's like anything, ultimately what it comes down to is the stuff good or not? It's the same thing when, everything went digital and all of a sudden you can make a movie much more easily, and that's great, because when I started out you couldn't do that. But equally it means a lot more bad movies are being made as well as good ones. So, there's always a flip side to these coins. It's great that stuff can get made, but essentially people need to be making good stuff.
Would you be concerned that that filmmakers go off and learn their trade, or is it just, hey, you got an idea, fella? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way or another you do have to learn a trade. You have to pay your dues. It's not easy to make a film. It's not easy to write a script, and sometimes people seem to think it is. The amount of people you meet who are like, oh yeah, I've written a script or whatever else. It's like, well, how many scripts did you write before you wrote that script? Because I wrote, 10 scripts that never got made before I wrote one that did, and that's probably just as well, because writing a feature-length script is not easy, and I'm still learning how to do it. There's a lot of craft involved, and the same with directing a feature, and you do sometimes meet people who seem to think it's their God-given right to go and make a film or whatever else without ever having done anything, and I'm a bit like, well, pay your dues. No one deserves this. I mean, some people can be a genius right off the bat, but most of us are not like that, unfortunately, and we need to practice a bit and we need to fail a bit. So sometimes I do worry that there's a bit of a sense of entitlement floating around.
One of the things we're going to be doing in an upcoming episode at some point is a discussion on film censorship. And what are your thoughts on censorship?
I mean, censorship for me is obviously, I grew up in the 80s. I lived through the video nasty era, and it was always a dirty word.
Yeah.
And it still is for me, really. I don't think that adults should be prevented from seeing anything they want to see. But luckily, certainly in the UK, we've come out the other end of the tunnel, I think. And I mean, yeah, you do every now and then something does still get banned, and I don't subscribe to that. Equally, I wouldn't always want to make any great claim for some of these films that have been banned. I mean, I sat through the Bunny Game and I was like, well, it's not very good. It's basically someone being tortured for 70, 80 minutes. I wouldn't want to see it banned. Equally, I'm not going to bang my drum and say we've lost a vital film here.
Yeah.
And I think classification is fair enough. I think giving people a bit of knowledge about what they're going to see is fine. I mean, the other thing you don't hear about a lot of the time is that when films get cut these days, a lot of the time it's a distributor asking for the cuts. Because they'll go into the BBFC and they'll say, we want a 15, and BBFC will look at it and say, well, what you've got is an 18. And the distributor will say, well, we need to cut it next. We want a 15. So a lot of the cuts you get in films these days are actually distributor mandated, which is something you don't often hear about.
In terms of the way the BBFC operates, they have a particular thing about, obviously, sexual violence and representation of kids in a sexualised manner. Hence all the zillion cuts to things like the Serbian film. Do you think there are particular themes that people consider to be that are more offensive, more supposedly dangerous and depraving than any other themes? Because I know obviously some of your films have incorporated things that are quite near the knuckle in a very beautiful way, I might add. Do you think there are things that are more dangerous or not?
I don't think these things are dangerous. I think they're very open to exploitation. I mean, yes, I've dabbled in that, and there's I kind of ping pong between the two really. I like doing the moody, atmospheric, subtle stuff, and then every now and then I just want to throw blood and other bodily fluids up the walls.
Huzzah!
Yes, and I see no reason why you shouldn't do that. And like I said, horror is a transgressive genre, and you should be able to break taboos and things like that. And it is just a case of how you do it. I don't think there's any subject matter that you shouldn't deal with. But it just kind of comes down to how well you're going to deal with it and how intelligently you're going to deal with it. It's too easy to sort of, portray things like rape and sexual violence and whatever else in a sort of titillating, unpleasant fashion. And, that really just comes down to personal responsibility. I don't think there should be anyone policing that. That's just down to individual filmmakers saying, am I doing this because I want to look at this subject matter and try and deal with it intelligently, or am I doing this because I think it's going to sell, but that's the horror movie all over. As a genre, it is open to various kinds of exploitation, and that's why a lot of it is junk. The great stuff is great, but there's a lot of stuff being made for the wrong reasons, and the transgressive stuff, I think, is equally prey to that.
Is there anything you'd love to put in a film at some point, or that you thought, whoa, this is going to be too far?
I have one scene like that in my next film, actually, or what may hopefully be my next film, which I'm obviously not going to tell you now. But a producer read it after I'd written it, and she was very uncomfortable with one certain scene, and I was like, that scene will be the scene in the movie that everyone talks about. But so far, I mean, if, touch wood, all goes according to plan, we might be making that movie next year. And so far, the powers that be have not said anything about that scene. So I'm kind of hoping it gets through, because the exec and the sales agent have both approved the script, and I've not had any notes about that scene back yet. So you'll just have to wait and see, but I'm hoping.
Oh, wicked. Can you give us, the slightest hint or anything you can think of maybe later?
No,
I can't leave me like this.
It's slightly it's an odd mixture of a sexual act and blasphemy. But beyond more than that, I cannot say. But the Catholics might not be very impressed with me. Put it that way.
You're a honey, and I love you to pieces. Is there any film that you will not watch on sheer principle?
I don't know. On sheer principle, there's films I have no interest in seeing. Something I wouldn't watch on sheer principle would be more likely to be a terrible Hollywood movie than anything independent. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into name calling. There are certain movies recently that I haven't watched just because I have absolutely no interest in seeing them, and I think that the people who've made them have just made them for shabbily exploitative reasons. There's certainly one that springs to mind, but I'm not going to get into it. But yeah, generally no. Every now and then something may come along, but that's because of strongly held personal opinions and possibly personal encounters with the filmmakers.
That's not surprising. Funny question. Do you dream?
Do I dream? I am one of these people who very often doesn't remember their dreams. Every now and then I'll have a particularly distinct one that makes an impression on me. But generally, no, I don't derive a lot of inspiration from dreams or anything like that. I don't have a lot of nightmares. I've had one or two humdingers in my time, but no, not so much really.
Humdinger of a nightmare. What is a Sean Hogan nightmare?
I'm trying to think now. The last time I had a real cold sweat nightmare. I do remember years ago from someone who's never made a zombie movie and has no particular interest in making one. I had a really a zombie dream a few years ago that made a real impression on me. That ended up with me being ripped apart, and it was very much, I think, came from the scene in Day of the Dead where Rhodes gets torn in half, and I ended up being torn in half in the dream. And I remember this feeling of my stomach dropping away, and then I woke up. So yeah, that made an impression on me. I'd say that much.
Very nice.
Oh, I wonder what that inspired.
So you're currently working on a play with Kim Newman, the Halloween sessions.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that?
Okay, well, that was something that came together very randomly over a drink and a chat in the pub, but sort of snowballed and became a reality very quickly. I've known Kim for a few years, and I've sort of been reading him for longer than that, so it's really great to be working with him, and a bunch of other sort of great UK genre writers as well. Stephen Volk, who wrote Ghostwatch and The Awakening last year, and a couple of novelists, Anne Bilson and Paul Macaulay, and Maura McHugh, who's a comic book writer. And yeah, basically, it's an anthology style play. It's very much in the vein of the old Amicus movies, and it's essentially deals with the main sort of framing story is set in an asylum on Halloween night, and we have a group therapy session with 5 patients telling the stories of how they came to be there. And the stories are told in different ways, but essentially the actors take on different roles in each of the stories. And then, of course, it being an Amicus-style anthology, the framing device has a payoff of its own. But I think it's going to be really great, and I can't actually announce any of the actors yet, but at the moment we have a couple of actors attached who will certainly be familiar to genre fans, who I'm very excited to be working with. And yeah, it's going to run at the Leicester Square Theatre from 29th of October to 3rd of November. It's going to be a limited run initially. We are looking into possibly bringing it back, but that will depend on how well it does. But tickets are selling fast at the moment, so anyone who wants to see it, I would say book now. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I've done bits and pieces of theatre over the years, and I've always enjoyed doing it. And the nice thing about theatre is that you don't have to spend a year raising money for it, or essentially not a show like this, which is being done sort of relatively cheaply. We just kind of put it together and we're doing it. And it was, so the whole process only took like 2 or 3 months for it to actually become a reality.
What the differences between directing, cinema and theatre?
Well, So there are certain core principles that are the same. You know, you still want to get the tightest possible script you can. You want to get the best actors you can. But with theatre, you're obviously dealing with a more limited palette and a smaller set of tools. But you are still, the nice thing about it is as much as I like working on the visual side of film, it's like that's something you don't have to concern yourself when you're doing theatre. You are still trying to create pictures in a way on the stage, but you're not having to deal with all the technicalities of it. It's essentially just you, the script, and the actors to a large extent. And that's what's nice about it. I think that's why I've always enjoyed working with actors, is because I did a fair bit of theatre when I was a kid. When I was studying film, I did a lot of theatre as well. And that sort of gave me a sort of nice core education in working with actors and speaking to people about on that sort of level, which is good. So it's nice to go back and do it. I mean, I'm looking forward to trying to scare people in the theatre, because again, you obviously have a more limited means by which to do it, but equally, I think in the here and now, if you can create an atmosphere in a live environment, things can still be really scary, and I'm looking forward to playing around with that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a big audience for horror on the stage at the moment. I think the Woman in Black last year, the film, definitely got people's interest in seeing the play.
Yeah, and I've still never seen. I've seen both the film versions of Women in Black, but I've never seen the play, and it's something I'm actually I'm probably going to go and do before our play starts its run. And obviously, you have Ghost Stories as well, which was hugely successful, and I enjoyed a lot. And we're well aware that we will probably be compared to Ghost Stories. They're both anthologies. But what the hell? We think we're coming from a similar place of love. And what we like to say is that we're the amicus to Ghost Stories' Dead of Night. We think Dead of Night was very much their main inspiration, and we're the amicus version.
One thing that actually I've just had a thought of, theatre, people generally seem to see theatre as a slightly more upper class thing, whereas horror seems to be very kind of, even though obviously going to cinema and that is bloody expensive, it's still got this kind of very working class feel to it. Do you think that that's something that's going to impact on audiences, or do you think they're going to say, hey, let's just go to the theatre anyway, or is it going to be a kind of cultural shift thing they've got to do?
I think these things can cross over. Yes, what you're saying about theatre is right, but equally, you look back at the history of theatre and you've got the Grand Guignol and all this kind of thing. It's, there has always been an audience for this kind of stuff in a live environment, and as we said, all you have to do is look at how well Women in Black and Ghost Stories did. I went to see Ghost Stories. It was a young audience. There were people, maybe they don't go to the theatre that often, but they were going to go and check this out because it was something a bit different. It wasn't stuffy. It wasn't middle class, and it was scary. So I just think the horror audience, which we all know there's a big audience for it, will seek things out. Will go and check something out, whether it be the theatre or whatever else. If it's going to be good and scary, and that's something we certainly hope that it will be.
Wicked. I must admit, I saw a reading of M.R. James stuff at the Abattoir Festival a couple of years ago, and the absolute git that I was with insisted that we sit on the front row right in the middle. I absolutely lost it. I
really?
screamed.
At which point in the story did you lose it?
Well, there was this bit that it was the story involving there's a burial that's involved. Something's buried, and basically I'm just trying to think of which one it was without giving too much away or anything. And the guy, because it was like one actor on stage, he'd just gone through like one of the passages really, and it was all coming back down. And then he just jumped up and went, whoa, and pointed, and it wasn't kind of loud, but by God Almighty, I just shot through the ceiling. And then right at the end, when everybody was clapping, I thought everything had gone, and somebody behind me coughed. I went again. I was such a bloody thing by the end of it. I was just, it just wound me up so tightly, because the entirety of the audience as well were buying into the fact this guy's obviously feeding off you. It's not like a cinema where the action's going to remain the same. But he was actively responding, and that's a beautiful thing. Having done theatre myself a lot in the past, that's a beautiful thing, because you can judge and you can really pull those strings.
Well, my certainly the individual episode that I wrote of the Halloween sessions definitely has an M.R. James element to it. So So that'll be interesting.
I think that just about does it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that
Sweet.
was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
You left Karen with her interests peaked, I think.
Oh, that's believe me, I could go on for hours. Just how much of it we could actually show and how much of it you'd actually answer is quite up to question.
Well, we'll have to leave something for next time.
Absolutely, because we are going to have you back,
Well, I'm very happy to do it. It was good fun. Like I say, after a solid afternoon of answering questions the other day, I wasn't sure how much I'd have left to give, but this was good. This was
well, this is good.
this was a bit it's definitely a few different things thrown into it.
This is the strange one.
Well, it's like me and him together, and seriously, we talk about sexual bollocky nonsense till 4 a.m. So yes. Basically, he looks sweet and innocent, but don't let it kid you.
They're always the ones you got to look out for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they say.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing something called Films and Filmmakers, which are shout-outs to social media platforms, teaser trailers, links, music, as you've already heard. Basically, everything we're trying to do to support independent filmmakers and independent artists, from directors out there to actors, projects looking for talent, anything basically, like Craigslist, but on a podcast. We just want to, we really do want to support independent artists, and we have 3 projects today to share with you on this first edition of Films and Filmmakers, on the first edition of the Geekeasy Podcast. The first of which is called A Twisted Showcase, which is made by a chap named Robin Bell, and it's a web series. It's an anthology web series, comparable to Twilight Zone, so Mr. Bell tells me. And it was actually named as a top 25 web series by The Guardian. So it has some acclaim to it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Very highbrow.
Absolutely. And it's got elements of comedy and horror and drama, so I think it's got a bit of everything. And like I said, comparable to The Twilight Zone. It's split into 5 segments, one of which is called Fear of Living. There's another called Bob Dracula. The Devil Inside Her, which sounds like it would be up your street, Karen.
Cheeky shit. Yep.
Eyeball is another name of one, certainly an interesting title. And you can find out all the information you want about this web series at twistedshowcase.com. So if you want to get your fix of a modern-day Twilight Zone, go to twistedshowcase.com.
Sounds wonderful, actually.
I know, I'm definitely going to click that. Sounds very interesting indeed, especially with those titles. And Bob Dracula. That's a fly-on-the-wall documentary, apparently, about an offspring who... a vampire's offspring who faces discrimination on a daily basis.
I think I've just fallen in love. That sounds amazing.
Fallen in love with Bob Dracula.
Yeah.
And now the devil's inside her. God. Cutting to the next project very quickly. The next 2 actually are made by a man called Paul, and I really hope I pronounce this guy's name right. It's Paul either Cotrulia or Cotrulia. I should have probably checked with him before, but he knows who he is. One of them is a short film called Masochist, but his main one is his first feature film, and that is called Modified. And that is actually having its world premiere at the Prince Charles Cinema in central London in September. And Modified is basically a sci-fi film about the strange world of body modification in the future. And it's getting a big screen premiere at the Prince Charles Cinema on Wednesday, September 12th. And actually, we're going to be giving away a couple of tickets to that very world premiere. The film will also be available through a number of online movie platforms to be announced. And there are 2 trailers online, so go on YouTube and look at Modified and, Google that stuff for all the information you like. But that is Paul Cotrulia's Modified. Again, I hope I pronounced his name right. At the Prince Charles Cinema on September 12th, the big world premiere of his film. So are you ready to give away 2 tickets to that world premiere?
Absolutely. Okay, listeners, here is your question. The question to win tickets to the premiere of Modified is, what is a Prince Albert? No
Yeah.
Googling and no touching anything else.
No Googling, wow. Don't, just whatever. Okay, if you don't know, Google it. Just don't Google image search it.
I'll make sure you've got a bloody good virus check. Please.
Yeah. Sadly, Karen's actually Google image searching it now, which is why she's slightly distracted. But yeah, 2 tickets to the world premiere of Modified, September 12th at the Prince Charles Cinema. 2 tickets will be going to one winner, but they can bring a guest, obviously, with that second ticket. And if you know the answer to Karen's delightful question, email the Geekeasy at yahoo.com or yahoo.com if you're one of our brothers across the pond.
Or sisters.
Yeah.
Or anything else.
Brothers or sisters or anything in between, across the pond or in like Mars or someone. Just send the answer to thegeekeasy at yahoo.com.
I'm very, very tempted to say as well that if they do win, it's fully expected that in keeping with the film that they turn up with their friend slash slave in a lead or some other appropriate mechanism. I think it would be quite appropriate, and it would also create a hell of a good thing for the press.
Yeah.
So you may also see us there, although Adam will not be on the lead, unless I'm very lucky.
I will not be on the lead. Karen may be on the lead with some other strange person. I don't know. I never know what to expect with Karen. But yes, there may be many leads flying around the Prince Charles Cinema on September 12th. I don't know. But you've seen the trailer, Karen, haven't you? And I've seen some footage, and it looks very interesting. But I don't think it's quite going down the modification scene that you're kind of delightfully hoping.
I realistically, all kind of tongue-cheekness aside, it looks like quite an interesting film in the sense of I love the way it's shot and some of the ways it's looking at different human relationships. Obviously, I've only just seen a little bit of the trailer, but I like the take it has on kind of bonding and coupling and stuff like that.
Yep, and it's a low-budget feature film, low-budget British feature film, as is Twisted Showcase, except that is a web series. Definitely up for supporting independent film, and you don't have to be British. We may be British, but you don't have to be British to listen to this or partake in it. So wherever you're from, and that applies to the competitions. Obviously, if you're not in England and you do win tickets to the world premiere of Modified, you will have to catch your own plane. That's not included in the price, unfortunately.
No, I think as you say, I mean, if people were to come over here anyway for a holiday or whatever, or indeed anything that we do on this podcast, it's lovely because the British have a particular sensibility. We have a very particular kind of very ironic and quite twisted humour occasionally, and it's
as they found out from listening to this.
It's very much kind of counterpoint against very much the perception of solidity, very much stiff upper lip. The perception that still a lot of people have across the waters of the English as being basically the idea that we all sit down to have tea with the Queen at almost at high noon there at 3 o'clock. But in terms of films such as this, it does allow us to begin to bring some of the more subversive traditions of Britain along, and quite frankly, as you'll soon see when we start discussing some of Sean Hogan's work as well. We've already done it. As you saw when we discussed Sean Hogan's work as well, it's a particular kind of quality that is very much peculiar to these islands, but which other people appreciate. So yes, it's a case of expanding your cinematic palette.
Absolutely.
And the more you do that, the more you begin to come attune to the different tastes. And hey, it's like having a really good beer.
Or a Copperberg, or a Magners, or a WKD or Bacardi Breeze or whatever it is. It takes you one bottle to get wrecked on.
Wine and good conversation, honey, that's all.
It's funny though, because even though we've got a hint of royalty in the question, you discuss things like expanding your cinematic palette, and then the question is, what is a Prince Albert?
Oh, you've got to have a bit of light and shade, otherwise you don't get anywhere in life.
Absolutely, and if people And if people read our little press release, then they will know exactly what to expect, hopefully, because, as we said there, this is a rather eclectic mix of the strange and the hopefully intelligent. Hopefully, again, I said hopefully, but probably more weirdness. But there's a compromise somewhere, okay? It's a good coffee. It's a good blend.
Exactly. I mean, realistically, we're both journalists. We're both journalists with serious publications. At the same time, you also have a career in film production. My main line of work is as a lecturer of film studies at university. I teach BA and MA level courses in film theory. While the podcast will get ridiculously silly at times, at the same time, the content will also be there in terms of sensibleness.
Well, where else are you going to find a podcast that discusses The Dark Knight Rises one second and then Japanese pinky violence the next?
Done no harm. She drinks her wine, pretends she's fine, then moves on with her life. Lays back against the porcelain wall. The water rises as she falls. Just one more time, she reassures her mind that we'll be fine. Ripple the water, cripple the life inside of you. Somebody's daughter, giving up, coming unglued. Yeah, there's still time to fix you. She stands before the mirror, still can't recognize his twisted self. Hands are shaky, she spills the pills that calm her nerves and numb her. Her eyes tell stories of endless pain. Every tear they spill like rain drops down her cheek into the sea, turning red to pink. Ripple the water, cripple the life inside of you. Somebody's daughter, giving up, coming unglued. Yeah, there's still time to fix you. It's hard to see what has become of you. So much time and so much shame. No more, no more, no more, no more, no more. There's so much more to life. How would you giving up, coming Yeah, there's still time to fix you.
There's another track there by independent artists that we want to support. That was the band Next September, and the song was Ripple. You can get that song absolutely free, and their entire album absolutely free. It's their debut album. Just go to nextseptember.com for their free debut album, and also you can find them on Facebook. That band is comprised of John Pruitt, Steve Underwood, Joe Tash, and Randy Berg, and I have been a big fan of these guys for years, so I think you should definitely check them out. And we would also like to thank for the pretty amazing Geekeasy theme that you heard at the beginning of the episode there. I guess that's just what we're going to call it, the Geekeasy theme. That was done for us by Christopher Brian Carfagno, so many thanks to him. And also our very cool logo, which I think kind of embodies the the Geekeasy Podcast in our name. And yes, that is a cocktail glass. If you didn't quite get why we're called Geekeasy, Speakeasy, get it? Okay. That logo was done by Barry Wilkinson, whose website you can go to is episode3.co.uk, and you can also follow him on Twitter at BazWilkinson85. It's a very nice logo indeed, and many thanks to him. And again, many thanks to Christopher Bryant Carfagno for a pretty funky theme tune. Well, that about does it for this very first episode of the Geekeasy Podcast. We really, really hope you enjoyed it and will stick with us and come back to us for the second episode, which will be in 2 weeks on August 15th, which again is a Wednesday. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do drop us a line, thegeekeasy@yahoo.com, the same email address as you use to enter the competitions. Of course, the Curb Your Enthusiasm box set and the 2 tickets to the Prince Charles Cinema world premiere of Modified. And also you can contact us on Twitter at Britgeek AICN for me, and again tout, Britgeek AICN on tout as well. And Karen, your Twitter and tout?
Is Doctor, which is Dr. Karen Oughton, spelled Oughton, because no bugger ever gets it right. So yes, I will be on there, and I will do my level best to respond to all of you, because I'm sure you're all lovely. I want to adopt you all. Aside from that, obviously do keep an eye out on our YouTube side and so forth, and please comment and say hi and wave and get involved if you have anything, any songs you'd like us to play or any films you want to, let people know about. Tell us! Seriously. Use us as your kind of mouth across the universe. Slightly uncontrolled mouth, but mouth.
Yeah.
And coming next episode on August 15th, we have the delightful Mr. Adam, who is going to be giving us his reaction to the Star of David, otherwise known as Beautiful Girl Hunter. And basically, I really, 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 really want it to be a fly on the wall just then. I think it's a great film. I really, really love it. But I understand some people think it may be an acquired taste.
Yes, I had never heard of it before you told me about it, Karen, and I've seen some very strange films. So I look forward to seeing that, I think, and you can hear my reaction on next week's... the next show.
Haha, you too. Squeeze, this is fun. For what it's worth, I mean, seriously, in terms of it, I do actually think it's also a very beautiful film. So, yeah, we're not just being personal sake of it. There is a, I really do think it's multi-layered. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm already going on defensive, aren't I?
Yes. I have to wait until next time to see Karen in full defensive mode. Maybe, unless I am similarly pleased by it.
I think you'll be very pleased, sir.
I will take your word for it.
I would just, I'm going to be good and not say that.
Now, the Geekeasy Podcast is experts in corrupting your DVD players.
Oh, yes, exactly. My computer hates me.
And possibly your minds. You're listening to 2 already corrupted minds. So I am sitting next to a tower of books where the first book on the tower is Jack the Ripper, the 21st Century Investigation, and Killer Clown, the John Wayne Gacy murders.
Oh, wow!
How about The Shrine of Jeffrey Dahmer?
I'm impressed, actually.
And about 6 books by John Waters. So that's the kind of thing that you're going to get on the Geeky Podcast, as I'm sure you've been able to extrapolate by now from this very strange first episode.
Well, thank you very much, and it's goodbye from me, Dr. Karen Oughton.
And goodbye from me. Isn't this like 2 Ronnies or something? Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll see you on the next episode of the 2 Ronnies. I mean, the Geekeasy Podcast.